This is Words Aptly Spoken, which comes from Proverbs 25:11. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver. The written word is a precious treasure. We want to preserve written knowledge for God's glory and as an anchor to the history of the church and its classical conversations. We hope to encourage the reading of words and of the word.
All right, well, welcome everyone. This month we are going to be discussing classical Christian education books, and some of those are a little more challenging, not all of them, but some. And so we decided to change up our format this month and offer what we call a just show up. You don't even have to have the book. I'm going to read to you, and then I'm going to pause occasionally, and we're going to have some quotations on the slides that will be sort of natural stopping points for us so that we don't have to do any prep here in the summer. I know people are busy getting ready for the academic year. So we're going to do a little bit of read aloud. Lee is at a parent meeting tonight in Canada, so she's not logging in and joining us. So it will just be me reading to you. And so hopefully you'll have lots of points of discussion. All right, so I'm going to start with the introduction to Stratford Caldecott's Beauty for Truth's Sake. And the subtitle is On the Re-Enchantment of Education. So if you have your copy, we're going to start on page 11 where the introduction starts. This is a book that has been quite influential in our thinking about math and science and the four arts of the quadrivium. So that's going to be our focus for tonight. So here we go. In the modern world, thanks to the rise of modern science and the decline of religious cosmology, the arts and sciences have been separated and divorced. Faith and reason often appear to be opposed, and we have lost any clear sense of who we are and where we are going. Most of us are prepared to let developments in science and technology dictate the shape of the future. We see our job as being merely to hang on tight, to survive, and maybe take whatever advantages are offered us along the way. But in the process, despite all the excitement of modern life, we begin to notice not only that we are damaging the earth and destroying our fellow creatures, but that we are becoming less than human ourselves. We are reduced to being consumers and producers, producing merely in order to consume. And I have this next sentence underlined in my copy. We have more and more stuff, but the world seems thinner and less substantial, and our own souls also. We have gained much, but we have lost our way in the shadows. Education is our path to true humanity and wisdom. By this, I do not mean simply what goes on in school and university, which all too often turns out to be a path in another direction, entirely away from both humanity and reason. I like Caldecott's style. I mean the broader process that engages us all through life. To be alive is to be a learner. Much of the learning we do takes place at home, in the family, or after we leave both home and college and begin the struggle to survive in the wider world. Increasingly, in a society shaped by technology that is continually changing, we need to learn a new skill: how to keep learning. We must be flexible and adaptable enough to survive in any circumstances. Even more important than flexibility is a virtuous character and set of guiding principles that will enable us to keep track of goodness amid the moral and social chaos that surrounds us. I believe it's possible to remain an active learner throughout life and yet to maintain a moral compass in good working order. But vital though they are, adaptability and ethics are not enough by themselves. There is a structural flaw in our education that we need to overcome. It is related to a profound malaise in our civilization, which by progressive stages has slipped into a way of thinking and living that is dualistic in character. The divisions between arts and sciences, between faith and reason, between nature and grace have a common root. In particular, our struggle to reconcile religious faith with modern science is symptomatic of a failure to understand the full scope of human reason and its true grandeur. The classical liberal arts tradition of the West once offered a form of humane education that sought the integration of faith and reason, and that combined the arts and sciences before these things became separated, fragmented, and trivialized. We need to retrace our steps to find the, quote, wisdom we have lost in knowledge, the knowledge we have lost in information, which is from T.S. Eliot, the poet and essayist, who, by the way, speaking of dualism, is claimed by both the British and the Americans. The wisdom I'm referring to can be traced back via Boethius and Augustine to Plato and Socrates. But before Socrates, there was Pythagoras, and the Pythagorean contribution is just as important in helping us to understand what was lost. This book is an attempt to discover and enter creatively into that Pythagorean spirit which lies at the root of Western civilization. That was a pretty big claim. So I think Christine has for us a good stopping place so we can digest a few of the quotations that we just read in that section. So if you want to show us, there we go. So this was the first one I said that's underlined in my copy. We're reduced to being consumers and producers, producing merely in order to consume. We have more and more stuff, but the world seems thinner and less substantial, and our own souls also. We have gained much, but we have lost our way in the shadows. So does anyone want to share a thought about that quotation?
All I can think of is the TV shows that have hoarders in them. They are lost, it's their stuff has taken over. Yeah, that's true. That was not a thing that was possible, say, for my grandparents who grew up during the Depression. That was not a possible impulse. Yeah, they saved rubber bands. I mean, yeah.
I know. Yeah. So good. Anybody else have thought about this?
Well, I think we have more stuff, but none of it, or a lot of it, doesn't have quality. Like I think about, way back when people made their own furniture and took pride in it, and it was passed down from generation to generation and had worth and value. And now we buy, furniture in boxes, and it only lasts until you move, and none of it's passed down. So it's, we have more, but we've lost that quality and substance.
Yeah, that's good, Sue. I was thinking about that. I was at Herman Melville's house in New England a week or so ago, and they pointed out the pieces in his farmhouse that his mother had moved. Their family ended up having continually reduced circumstances, but she had about 3 pieces of furniture that were massive, solid pieces of artistic craftsmanship. And she moved those things, I'm assuming by cart or wagon, to all the homes they lived in. And that says something to what you just said, Sue. Good.
I think also it's, when in talking about reduction and being reduced, as we acquire stuff and we think we're being, we think we're being enlarged by the things that we have. And yet here he's talking about us being reduced, by falling into that.
Yeah. I think about this with books too, because if I hoard anything, it's that. And our cheap publishing industry makes it possible for us to publish thousands and thousands of books, and maybe that's not better for us. So, all right. Do we want to flip to the next slide? This is also from this section, and I think it's just the T.S. Eliot. Oh, nope, it's not yet. So this is about the dualism. So the division between arts and sciences, between faith and reason, between nature and grace have a common root. In particular, our struggle to reconcile religious faith and modern science is symptomatic of a failure to understand human reason and its true grandeur. Did anyone grow up with a fragmented education? I see some nodding. Does someone want to share?
Well, I grew up with standard government education, but I didn't realize it was fragmented, right? Until not even the first year in CC, several years in to CC and classical education, light bulb moment of, oh, it's not separate subjects. It doesn't need to be separate subjects, right? To where we are now and what we know is, and it, of course, now I can't really remember very well learning that way, learning in a segmented way, right? So it's kind of neat.
Yeah, that's a blessing when you get to that stage. I think I shared this on the book club before, but one of my students was particularly fascinated that I work in curriculum development for CC. And so whenever we would have these great moments of realizing the fabric of the universe, he would always go, wow, it's almost like you designed the curriculum so we would realize this. And I would always say, I'm not that amazing. Thank you. And no, God designed the universe that way. We're enjoying discovering that together. I did not plan today, to be clear. I'm just enjoying it with you. So good. All right. Do you want to go one more, Christine? And we can always backtrack if you have a thought that comes up. But I do want to get to this T.S. Eliot quotation. We need to find the wisdom we have lost in knowledge and the knowledge we have lost in information. Does that speak to anyone?
Oh, yeah, for sure. There is an abundance of knowledge now, especially with the internet, facts, and all of that, but wisdom is greatly lacking. And to piggyback off of what Sue said earlier about, I think of our consumer society. Really, it's a utilitarian society, and it has to be of immediate use or it's of no value. And at the same time, coupled with that, it's a disposable society.
Yeah.
I was wondering if the integration, like we talk about the fragmentation. So if the wisdom is lost because we no longer as a society value the dialectic or the understanding, because that often takes listening to somebody else. So to find the wisdom we have lost in knowledge, right? There's so much information out there, but there's no dialectic, or rarely. And so it never blossoms into wisdom.
Yeah. That's good. And partly because that takes time, right? To dialogue with someone and wrestle down your definitions and sort and make meaning. It's time consuming. Good. Did I cut someone off?
That's true. We've
I was
lost
gonna
the whole
add-
traditional story of Western civilization.
Yeah.
We've lost all of what the philosophers, who often were mathematicians, have taught us. So we continue to gather information, but without wisdom backing it, we lose our way pretty easily.
Yeah, that's true. And were you gonna, I heard one other person underneath Brittany.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think that I'm still getting lost in knowledge. And it's the knowledge of being in the world instead of the world. And I need to turn all of that stuff off so that I can concentrate on this beautiful stuff that you all have curated for us to recapture our education, and start thinking about the wisdom that is coming out, or that is in all of the novels and literature and things that our kids are learning in CC.
Yeah, and the process itself it's not fast, but it is simple in the sense that, what we're doing here and what you've been joining us for many weeks now, Michelle, is to take a great book and dive into it. And there's no way we've touched on all the ideas in any of the books, but it's a start toward finding the wisdom. So that's been beautiful. That's been beautiful to me to have you along on that journey. So.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take many, many years. So how long are you planning on doing this, Jennifer?
Oh, I don't believe in retirement, so. Oh, well, good. Well, let's take a look at page 13 if you're following along, and I'm going to start at the last paragraph. Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to read straight through tonight. I'm going to skip some passages. So I'm going to actually skip to the, the third sentence or the second sentence. And he's talking about a document that the Pope issued, but I want to get to this idea that the Pope's vision is one which human existence is fundamentally liturgical. That is to say, our lives can be oriented toward God by prayer and action in such a way that the interior world of the human soul and the exterior world of the society and universe are brought into harmony. Thus, liturgy, which we often consider a purely human business, something of relevance only to religious believers, is closely related to the mathematical ordering of time, space, and matter. So, in other words, questioning that separation, right? That liturgy belongs just as much to us being here tonight and understanding our attempts to understand time, space, and matter as it belongs in the church. So I'm going to look at his quotation here from Pope Benedict. Among the fathers, it was especially St. Augustine who tried to connect this characteristic view of the Christian liturgy with the worldview of Greco-Roman antiquity. In his early work on music, he is still completely dependent on the Pythagorean theory of music. According to Pythagoras, the cosmos was constructed mathematically, a great edifice of numbers. Modern physics, beginning with Kepler, Galileo, and Newton, has gone back to this vision, and through the mathematical interpretation of the universe has made possible the technological use of its powers. For the Pythagoreans, this mathematical order of the universe, and he notes in parentheses that cosmos means order, was identical with the essence of beauty itself. Beauty comes from meaningful inner order. And for them, this beauty was not only optical, but also musical. Goethe alludes to this idea when he speaks of the singing contest of the fraternity of the spheres. The mathematical order of the planets and their revolutions contains a secret timbre, which is the primal form of music. The courses of the revolving planets are like melodies. The numerical order is the rhythm, and the concurrence of the individual courses is the harmony. And so we have that idea traced down through Kepler, and in some of our 20th century hymns, this idea that the spheres actually sing. In fact, Kepler actually put the first 5 planets and their orbits onto musical staves as a melody, which is a weird thought to us that he would do that. But he was literally hearing God's music in the universe when he looked at the numbers that had to do with the astronomy he was studying. So what do you guys think about this idea of beauty and music and order?
There's a video series that Louis Giglio did a few years ago, and he overlaid the sounds of the stars, which like this with the sounds of whales, and just different sounds from creation, and the rhythm that they made. He actually eventually overlaid the song "How Great Is Our God," and it's like breathtaking to listen to, because it's not created, it's not man-made sounds. Like the only thing they did was amplified the volume of certain things. And it just literally, you mentioned the hymn, it just makes me think that phrase, the music of the spheres.
Yeah. The hymnist took that right from Kepler, and before that, the Pythagoreans. Good.
Remember that painting that Robert showed us? Oh, I think work is worship, when he introduced that idea, and he showed us, I want to say it was a painting by Jean Millet of the workers in the field, the peasants, and you couldn't hear it, but the church bells were going off. So that was the liturgy of life. The work stopped when the church bells, and they prayed. And I've always thought of that as such a, I hear music when I think about that picture, and like a liturgy of life that was all integrated, right? There wasn't a separation of work and Sunday and work days, and it was kind of together.
Yeah, that's good. Angels in the architecture. Good.
This might be too simplistic because I'm not on your level of ladies here. But I think back or what I've read, and my mom had Alzheimer's, and the fact that people that have dementia and their brains are not working right, but music seems to bring them back. So
Mhm.
it's, in the universe, it's, I mean, your heartbeat, the music of your heartbeat that the baby understands and recognizes the mother's heartbeat. And then this music stays with them, even though we don't know what's going on in their brain. We just know that it's all messed up, but there seems to be that music that will bring people back.
Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful point, Sue. I saw that with my own grandmother too. That we forget, it's one of those things where things have become fragmented and specialized, and so we don't think of ourselves as artists and musicians, which is again not a liturgical way of thinking about ourselves and our place in the universe. So if you read all these, Jane Austen novels, everyone's playing music. Some of them do it badly, but they're all playing music.
True.
Good. I'm going to skip over to page 15 for a minute, and so that we can keep going on this theme of singing with the universe. So I'm still finishing up the giant block quotation, the last paragraph of it. To sing with the universe means then to follow the track of the Logos and to come close to him. All true human art is an assimilation to the artist, to Christ, to the mind of the creator. The idea of the music of the cosmos, of singing with angels, leads back again to the relation of art to Logos. But now it is broadened and deepened in the context of the cosmos. Yes, it is the cosmic context that gives art in the liturgy both its measure and its scope. A merely subjective creativity is no match for the vast compass of the cosmos and for the message of beauty. When a man conforms to the measure of the universe, his freedom is not diminished, but expanded to a new horizon. So that's the end of his long quotation. And then he says, the big themes in this passage are liturgy, mathematics, art, music, science, and worship. How are these all related? Through the Logos. The Logos meaning word, speech, principle, thought, and designed, and identified by the fourth gospel with Jesus of Nazareth, is the mediator between heaven and earth, between the invisible one and the visible many. Western civilization has long since lost its sense that cosmic order has to be rooted in a Logos. It is no coincidence that it lost its faith in God at the same time. If God is not connected with the universe by some kind of mediation through the Son, then he floats off into abstract space and faith starts to seem meaningless. And I'm going to skip the next quote to get more of Caldecott in. So we'll start on page 16 where Caldecott returns to us. As we search for this lost wisdom of the world, we will keep coming back to a rather significant fact. As our own eyes reveal every day, the universe is beautiful. It has majesty, order, and loveliness. These three types of beauty are precisely what scientists themselves love to discover in the world. So if we want to, I think I have that on the slide, Christine. We'll see if I did. So is Leslie still here? Are you where you can speak, Leslie? I kind of want you to hear your thoughts on the fact that this is what scientists search for, is that idea of majesty, order, and loveliness. How does that motivate them?
Well, I'm thinking on that. When they make a new discovery, they seem to be amazed that there is either majesty, order, or loveliness to something. It seems to catch them off guard and surprise them, rather than to be what one might expect in an ordered cosmos designed by a creator. Of course, they don't believe it's designed by a creator, and maybe that's why it catches them off guard.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yet, I think most of them who are, again, let me go out on a limb and you tell me if I'm wrong. I think most of them, if they're honest enough, are still motivated by love for what they're regarding. Whether or not they acknowledge the creator, that's what seeks them to know it more. Is that fair?
I'm not sure that it's love or it's desire. And I'm not sure those two things are the same.
Well, I don't know if we have time to get into to Plato tonight. That might be something you want to explore more by reading the Phaedrus, but I don't want to digress there. I think he might try to make a pretty solid argument that they're one and the same, but I don't know if I agree with him yet. So
Okay.
we won't go on that digression yet. Good. One thing I thought was interesting is Leslie led us on a bit of an odyssey lately where she had us looking at birds in our own yards. And I can tell you that everyone was highly motivated by love to look at these birds, to study their characteristics, to listen to their songs. We had one team member who diagrammed their songs and the rise and fall of the bird song, and some who drew them and some who started feeding them and naming them. And so it was all together celebrating the loveliness of the universe. Okay. Does anyone want to have a last reflection on that quotation before we read a little more? Whoop. You guys are good? Okay. All right. So I want to go to page 17, where Caldecott, after quoting a lot of wonderful authorities that we don't have time to explore, tells us the 3 main points of the book. So I'll read it and then we'll look at my abbreviated version on the slides. The following points may serve to sum up the thrust of the book. The way we educate is the way we pass on or transform our culture. It carries within it a message about our values, priorities, and the way we structure the world. The fragmentation of education into disciplines teaches us that the world is made of bits that we can use and consume as we choose. This fragmentation is a denial of ultimate meaning. Contemporary education therefore tends to the elimination of meaning, except in the sense of a meaning that we impose by force on the world. Not one that we submit ourselves to, but one that we force on it. The keys to meaning are and always have been form, gestalt, beauty, interiority, relationship, radiance, and purpose. An education for meaning would therefore begin with an education in the perception of form. The re-enchantment of education would open our eyes to the meaning and beauty of the cosmos. And then finally, education begins in the family and ends in the Trinity. Praise of beauty, service of goodness, and contemplation of truth are essential to the full expression of our humanity. The cosmos is liturgical by its very nature. So that was kind of a mouthful. Any thoughts that you have? This is him giving us his purpose for the need for his book and for us to fix our educational system. I saw you smiling and nodding at point 3, Lynn. Did you have a thought?
How did you know?
I just know you. I know you well through Zoom.
It's one of those things that you look back on. I did a global IM today, and all these people that have never homeschooled before, and they're asking me, you graduated kids, is it worth it? Like, I don't know if I should do this. And I thought about we believe that education is the role of the family, right? And I think CC has done such a beautiful job of keeping it in the family, starting in the family, but it always, if it goes where it's supposed to our mission, it ends in the Trinity. So anyways, just what a lovely thing to think about.
Yeah, I think so. I'm always telling my students, by the end of every challenge day, you should have one of 2 responses, and hopefully eventually both. One is that you fall down and worship, and the other one is that you rise up and serve. If we don't do that, then I'm not sure what we're doing. We should be so in awe of what we learned today that it just causes us to fall down and worship who God is as we know him more, even if that's in subatomic particles. So, all right, well, let's dig into the book. Now that he has tipped his hand about his purposes, let's start on page 19 with the tradition of the 4 ways. So teachers often tell us that modern students don't know how to think. Setting aside the fact that this is a perennial complaint made by teachers about their students in every age, it may be true that the conditions of modern life militate against independent thought in particular ways. Silence is rare. Entertainment is all pervasive. The pressure to consume and discard is almost irresistible. No one has put it better than G.K. Chesterton did in 1930. Quote, people are inundated, blinded, deafened, and mentally paralyzed by a flood of vulgar and tasteless externals, leaving them no time for leisure, thought, or creation from within themselves. The situation has grown worse in every decade since. No wonder students come to a college education expecting nothing more than a set of paper qualifications that will enable them to earn a decent salary. The idea that they might be there to grow as human beings, to be inducted into an ancient culture, to become somehow more than they are already is alien to them. They expect instant answers, but they have no deep questions. The great questions have not yet been woken in them. The process of education requires us to become open, receptive, curious, and humble in the face of what we do not know. The world is a fabric woven of mysteries, and a mystery is a provocation to our humanity that cannot be dissolved by Googling a few more bits of information. So, thoughts about this quotation of our lack of time to think and have silence? Does this resonate with anyone?
I think the way that we ask our students, maybe not so much to tell us stuff, but to come up with good questions. I love that. They look for immediate answers or instant answers, but have no deep questions. I think we spend 6 years asking them to ask good questions.
Yeah. Good. I forced my students to use Latin dictionaries this year in community. I just bought a whole bunch of them at the used bookstore that's next to the university. So I got them for like $1.50 each. So I just bought 12. I kept going back and buying more and more until I had 12. And I just throw them in my cart. They're not very heavy. And so I pass them out at the start of our grammar strand each week. And one of my students was looking up a word that we had on the board, but he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Courtney, I got distracted because I saw this other word on the page." And I thought it stopped me in my tracks, because I thought, this is a thing that does not happen to you when you Google the word.
Oh my goodness, you're right.
But that rabbit trail was really important for him, because it led to his understanding of a meaning of one of his community members' names, which had a Latin root, which is altogether lovely and important for him to know her better by knowing that about her name. And it just struck me how very rare that is for them to have moments of serendipity, because what they ask for is handed to them with no digging. So anyway. Good. Anybody else? I feel like I'm telling too many stories tonight, as usual.
But your stories are always so good, Jennifer. So we just sit here at your feet.
Oh.
In this one little quote that you have on the screen, it is what I have been thinking and feeling for at least 10 years. Anywhere I go, there's just no silence. Everybody wants to be entertained. Everybody wants to be going to the mall and consuming, and who knows what it is that they do with whatever it is they purchase, whether it's clothes or that it's food. And I was thinking about last night. I came home and nobody was in the house. My kids are in California visiting friends for a couple of weeks. This is the longest time my husband and I have been alone together since they were born, almost 16 years ago. And he was at a friend's house, and I sat down at my table or my chair, and I was on the computer, but I was working, but there was just complete silence in the house. And I was reveling in it, just to be in that silence, because the work was making me think of other things and all of that stuff. But I was thinking this would never happen if everybody else was home, that there would just be silence. And it makes me sad when I think about people not being able to sit in silence and just think. So anyway,
it's really
that's my
easy.
story for tonight.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. One of my pet peeves is having the news on at the gas pump.
Yeah, right.
I turn my back.
Can I have 3 minutes to think?
We would talk about when we would take road trips that we deliberately bought a van that didn't have a TV in it. People thought we were crazy because we have 4 kids. But I was like, the screen is outside of your window. And they started noticing that like kids that had TV would just be staring at it and they would be missing everything. It's like, look at that guy, look at that flower in the crack of the sidewalk. Oh, look at that truck. Even the license plate games and the red cars and the blue cars, like it's not always silence, but it's to them because they're on the other side of the window. When they get quiet or a few of them fall asleep and they're just looking and taking in the world, and you're just like, what is God even speaking to you in those moments when you are silent, even as a child, just taking in his creation? And I think sometimes we do have to deliberately unplug, or families or our own lives, in order to have those moments.
Yeah. And it has to be deliberate. I think that's a good word that you used. And we have to purpose to live in a liturgical way. Good. All right. Well, let's keep going on page 20 under the Great Tradition, because I do want to get to the 7 liberal arts before we finish. Tonight is supposed to just be a teaser so that everyone will want to grab this book and read it with your friends. All right. The liberal arts tradition stands at the origin of the idea of university education in the West. The liberal arts, from liber, meaning free, were intended to train man in the use of his freedom and to prepare the student for the higher study of philosophy and theology, through which one may become truly free, fully human. They were contrasted with the so-called servile arts, which is not a term of contempt, but covers branches of knowledge oriented toward practical ends or economic purposes, such as fabric making, metalworking, and architecture, commerce and agriculture, hunting, navigation, medicine, and entertainment. In other words, philosophy and theology were not, as they have become, subjects defined by a certain content on the same level as everything else, accessible to anyone. We had to become capable of them, and the liberal arts were our preparation. In the modern university, this preparation is usually missing, and so are the higher studies themselves. Only the names are left. University education is usually traced back to the Greek philosopher Socrates and his moral victory over his state executioners. In his own life, he demonstrated his own teaching, summarized in the Phaedo, that philosophy is a preparation for dying, or rather for dying well. Of course, Socrates, who wrote nothing down except in the immortal souls of his disciples, would have been unknown to later generations except for the work of one of those disciples, Plato. Through Plato's Academy from 387 BC and Aristotle's Lyceum from 335 until their closure, possibly in AD 529, and the writings and followers of both men, these principles instilled by Socrates were transmitted and applied by later educators. What were those principles? In essence, that it is the nature and calling of the human being to know truth, being, wisdom, goodness, virtue, the forms, or the highest causes. It is in knowledge that we transcend our limitations, including the limitations of mortality, and become identified with the truth that is our highest and deepest ground beyond all that the senses can offer. But knowledge can only be attained through the systematic ordering of the soul or personality in pursuit of integrity, that is, the discipline of thought by logic and will by virtue. And so we look at some of these 7 liberal arts we're quite familiar with, and it's because I see lots of familiar faces from classical conversations. So I know that at some point in your life, you have talked about and tried to pursue the arts of grammar and dialectic and rhetoric, and have somewhat of a background in those. But then he goes on to talk about the next 4, which are the arts of numbers, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music. So those over time coalesced. At some points there were 9 liberal arts, and eventually they settled into 7, just like there were lots of common topics that eventually settled into 5. There were some dispute about the number of arts that settled into these 7. And as he said, these were a ladder that you ascended. You practiced these arts, which is what prepared you for philosophy, for finding wisdom, and then for finding ultimate truth in theology, which was the mistress of all of the sciences. So we can picture this, if it were turned upside down, it'd be a ladder, so that we have the trivium, and then you ascend to the quadrivium, and then at some point you ascend to philosophy and then theology. That would be kind of a ladder of learning that you could climb up if you were practicing your arts. So if we want to flip one more, Christine, we'll look at the definitions of the quadrivium, since we're a little less familiar with those. So these were defined as arithmetic, which is pure number, geometry being number in space, music being number in time. So if you think about the music theory book that we use right now called Math in Motion, that's literally what that means. It's an idea from the Pythagoreans that music involved moving numbers through time. And then astronomy was both of those, numbers moving through both space and time. So then you get a story like what Nancy Pearcey recounts about Kepler in The Soul of Science, where she talks about the fact that Kepler was bothered because the orbit for one of the planets was off by a small, what to me might be a negligible number that you could overlook. That I'm ashamed to say that, but I'm not sure I would have pursued it with the zeal that Kepler did. But he knew that God was a God of order, and that those numbers in space and time mattered. And that is what led him to keep digging until he could mathematically show an elliptical orbit for the planets. So, good. Any questions about our 7 liberal arts? Goodness, we're running out of time. Everyone's pondering. It's a lot to take in, because for one thing, these studies were considered studies for young adults, not children. So we still have a long way to go to recover what this means, to climb that ladder of learning, and what order to do things in, and when we're ready for these things, and what do they actually mean. What we pursue if we're doing arithmetic with a very small child is only a shadow of what the Pythagoreans would have considered to really be arithmetic. So it will take us time to recover, I think, the meaning of all these. All right, well, I'm afraid, sadly, that we have 2 minutes left. So I feel like I need to put our closing quote up and then take questions and reflections. So Christine, if you can skip to our last one. This is back up one. I'm sorry. I'm going to read 2. I'm going to cheat, because I don't want you to miss this one from page 27, that when the universities in the Middle Ages also lost their way a bit, Caldecott argues that the cathedral maintained the true sense of the quadrivium. Here, the sacred sciences of the quadrivium were expressed in massed stone and statuary, rose windows and labyrinths, and in the interplay between light, music, and sacramental gesture. So that was a space where arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music coalesced into a liturgy in the buildings themselves and in the activities that those buildings housed. And I loved that thought as I was rereading this time. So now we can put back our closing one, which we've read. No wonder students come to a college education expecting nothing more than a set of paper qualifications that will enable them to earn a decent salary. The idea that they might be there to grow as human beings, to be inducted into an ancient culture, like the 7 liberal arts we just talked about, to become somehow more than they are already, is alien to them. They expect instant answers but have no deep questions. The process of education requires us to become open, receptive, curious, and humble in the face of what we do not know. The world is a fabric woven of mysteries, and a mystery is a provocation to our humanity that cannot be dissolved by Googling for a few more bits of information. And if you go on to read Caldecott, you will, I think, have 2 reactions. One, you will be astounded by the beauty of what you can learn in mathematics in a way that you never thought possible. And 2, you will have to go through a phase where you were upset that no one ever mentioned these things to you when you were younger. those seem to be the twin emotions that this book arouses in people. I'm not sure what order they happen in. Generally, it's the frustration first, like how come no one ever told me all these things before? And then it's the, now that I know about them, I can revel in the beauty and the mysteries, and I can realize that I still have many years where I can reclaim my education in the mathematical arts. So, all right, well, for the sake of time, because we have another podcast, I do need to show you what book we're doing next time, but I will hang out for a couple minutes for folks who do have lingering questions. So next time, we're going to talk about Doug Wilson's book, The Case for Classical Christian Education, which is a little shorter and maybe a little less heady than this one, but hopefully we dug in enough tonight to get you curious. So I appreciate you guys being here and sharing. And like I said, I'll hang out for any last questions since we went kind of fast at the end.